Welcome back, guys. Let's cover some more draw types. So last class I mentioned draw types, right? And I was talking about places you can go to find draw types and verify or find out what types are available. And this is, of course, the Lua API. If you're familiar with the Lua API at all, you'd recognize this. And you can search for node draw types, and that will pull up. It should take you to around about line 1067, and you can look through all of the node types. Of course, we have a description underneath and whatnot. But let's get back to the textbook and kind of review some of the specific draw types they've mentioned here. First one I want to talk to you about is glass-like. It is just like all the other draw types, except that it's just like it in the sense that it only renders the sides that are visible. You can see like this node right here. From the perspective of the camera, you would only be able to physically see this side and this side. And then this side over here, right? The right side you do not see. The left side you don't see, and the back side, the bottom side you don't see, right? So it doesn't even render those. It doesn't even render those pictures and slap them on right into the image that's given to you. However, the big difference here is that it still does render the nodes that are touching it or behind it. For instance, you can see here that we have some what looks like, I don't know what, let's just say the grass here. We have some grass going underneath these nodes, and if it was a regular draw type, it would be black empty space underneath, as you may have experienced, making a transparent node and placing it on the ground. You just can see straight through the ground at that point, because you haven't specified, you haven't told the Minetest how to draw that node and how to render the surrounding environment, right? So glass-like does just that. Now, and you define it, draw type, glass-like. I would go through some of these, some of the description, because it does help you understand how you might want to go about creating a glass-like object. Draw type is one thing, but then you also want to factor in, what the textures are and things like that. All right, so next one is very similar. It's glass framed, and from what I understand, it simply renders the edges differently. It just renders the edges. It also it does some really fancy stuff here, as you can see. It renders the sides, it renders the back, it renders the front, it renders the bottom and the top. However, if it's touching a glass-like underscore framed draw type node, as it is here, it's too deep, right? It doesn't render the back side. You don't see like a frame in between, in the middle of this thing. You don't see something running down the middle. So it does some really fancy rendering here and gives you this like framed glass. Certainly much more aesthetically pleasing. Okay, air-like nodes, fairly self-explanatory. It just draw type equals air-like. And all that's going to do is it's going to prevent the node from even appearing. And so even if you gave it a texture, I think that it would just get rid of that texture and it would become transparent. Now, there are several other things you need to do in order to create a node that's actually air-like. And that's some of the dealing with some of the methods that we have talked about in the past. Walkable, pointable, diggable, buildable too. These are different nodes that allow you to pass through and to place on this node. And so if you didn't, for instance, specify buildable 2 equals true, then you would not be able to place, even though you could walk through the substance, you would not be able to place anything because you could not swap out the position of that air for the node that you're trying to place. So that's an important one. Air-like. Here is one of those properties or methods that are important to define to give that node the functionality you expect. If you remember when I was talking about just a second ago, air-like, you would expect air to not only be you could walk through it, you could build on it, but you'd expect light to pass through it. And this is something that you have to actually define. Now, this parameter here, that's defining that the node actually saves the light level. And I don't fully understand at this time what exactly the significance of that. And so that's all that I can explain for now. The second line, talking about sunlight propagates, is that property that you expect from an air-like node, and that light will pass through it without diminishing. And that's all we're going to cover for today. I want to see the two types of glass that I've mentioned, two draw types for glass, and then also I want to see whether the light with the lighting turned off or on. Mess around with param type as well. Check the Lua API to see what param type even does. So I want to see a picture of the glass types, the various situations, scenarios. So don't make just the default glass, right? Make a texture that has a transparency, and then create a node and just mess around with it. Set the draw types to glass-like, glass-like _ framed, if I'm not mistaken, and just see how that changes things up. And then turn on and off the lighting, and to see how that also affects the lighting, right? And then find param type. Well, just mess around with param type, see what it does. Try to understand it better. Thanks for watching, guys.